Okay, the last video we didn't quite get through the rest of the Australia states and territories notes, but you did get Northern Territory written down, that it's a federal run territory, and its capital is Darwin, named after Charles Darwin, who studied survival of the fittest, who talked about evolution of plants and animals due to predators and so forth. Most of the land in Northern Territory is dry desert, and it does have farming, but mostly cattle ranches and cattle stations. A lot of manganese is found here, and it is one of the major natural resources in this region. And the Ayers Rock is one of the biggest tourist attractions. It is the world's largest red pebble or moneth rock. Um, it is 1.5 miles long, 1,142 feet above the land, and it has a lot of caves covered with rock paintings, very similar to what we talked about with Altamira and Lascaux in Europe. Now, really, you should go and see this at night or right at dusk or dawn, because the orange color of the clay or the stone really reflects the sun at that particular time. So that's one of the biggest tourist attractions. All right, other cities besides the capital city of Darwin is Alice Springs and Rum Jungle. Who wouldn't want to live in a city by the name of Rum Jungle? Go ahead and label Northern Territory. Again, it's very similar to South Australia and Western Australia. It's geographically accurate, so it's in the north, and you can see where Darwin and Alice Springs are located. All right, the last state is called Queensland, of course, named after the Queen. It's Queensland. Its capital is Brisbane. It's well known for a tourist attraction of the Great Barrier Reef, the world's largest coral reef. So you can go, scuba, snorkeling, see the coral, see the wildlife that exists here. It's named after the Queen of England, as I already mentioned, and it has lots of cities along the coast because the whole coast of Queensland is the Great Barrier Reef. So a lot of tourism. So besides Brisbane, you've got Gladstone, Cairns, Toowoomba, and Townsville. So label Queensland. It's your last state or territory on the island. And again, you can see lots of cities along the edge, along the Great Barrier Reef. All right, let's move on to New Zealand. New Zealand people are called Kiwis, not because of the fruit, but because of the kiwi bird. Again, it's a unique bird that does not fly, that lives on New Zealand, and that's the only place in the world that you can find it. It used to be able to fly, but because it had very few predators, it didn't need to fly away. So its wings have evolved to be smaller little nubs, basically, and so now it cannot fly. It's also on the coin currency of New Zealand, which I can show you in class. All right, the other thing, look at the flag in the background again. Very similar to Australia's flag, has a little bit more red and white stars versus just plain white, but it still has the British flag up in the top left, but it is absolutely 100% independent country, so that makes it a little bit different than Australia. The population of New Zealand is about 4.5 million people. The area is 104,000 square miles. They also speak English because of the British heritage. Literacy rate is also 99%, and the life expectancy is 79.1 and 83.3. Not quite as long as Australia, but again, they live longer than in the United States. You don't have to write that down, but again, it's just good to compare to what we know about the United States. Very similar English, 99% literacy, about the same life expectancy, but definitely not close when it comes to population in an area. Land, there are two main islands, South Island and North Island, geographically easy to remember. South Island is mostly mountains, hills, glaciers on about 75% of the land because it's closer to the South Pole. North Island has a lot of geothermal activity, volcanoes, geysers, hot springs, mountains slash hills, and even some plains. Most of the population of New Zealand lives on the North Island, and because of that geothermal activity, just a good example, in 2010, there were 11 earthquakes. So it has a lot to do with that geothermal activity. And it looks like earthquakes is spelled wrong. So just make sure you spell it correctly in your notes. Climate. Seasons are reversed because, again, they're in the southern hemisphere, but they aren't as warm as Australia because they're closer to the South Pole. Average temperatures are between 70 degrees and 40 degrees. Some places on the islands get over 300 inches of rain a year. Some only get about 14 inches of rain per year, and that's due to mountains in the middle of the island and the ocean and wind currents that carry the moisture. Plants and animals, once again, like the kiwi bird, can only be found on the islands here. It's varied and unique because it's an island. These animals can't get off the island, and other animals can't get on the island unless they are brought by man. History. The original people of New Zealand were called moa hunters, but they have died out. There are no more ancestors of the moa hunters. The second group of people were the Maoris. They settled next. And once again, Captain James Cook did explore this part of the world, claimed Australia and New Zealand for Britain. And New Zealand got its independence from Britain in 1852. New Zealand's federal capital is Wellington. All right, so label New Zealand on your map. It's kind of on the southeast side of Australia. Two islands, again, North Island and South Island. You don't need to know those for the test, but it's obviously labeled.